Hey, welcome to Journey Church Online. I'm so glad you joined us today. My name is Matt, and I'm your host for today. And I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. I hope today will be a meaningful experience for you. As we are in this series called Pursue, we're all about pursuing God, and we want to take steps to experience more of Him in our life, because in a relationship with God, that's when we find our best life. And we call that relationships, not religion. We want to take steps to follow Jesus, to spread kindness, to share hope, and be better together. And so I want to just encourage you to consider some of those steps. And if you want to take some steps to really grow in that relationship, especially with God, I want to encourage you to check out our growth pathway. If you go to the resource page of our website, there's a link right there for the growth pathway, and it will guide you through some steps to consider for you to take some steps with God so that you might grow in that relationship with Him. We also have a special growth pathway class coming up. If you're local, on January 31st, it's about how to read the Bible and how to pray. You might want to check that out. We also have network events and Financial Peace University and other things starting up in the next 2 weeks. So make sure you check out the Next Step Center. If you go right to there, you'll find a blog with all the details for everything going on this month. You'll also find a Connect card if you have any prayer requests or if you need more information. There's also a guest card there. If you're kind of new to church online, I want to encourage you to consider filling out that guest card, because we can just follow up with you, encourage you. We won't harass you, but we will just encourage you any way we can for you, wherever you're at on your journey. You'll also find on our website links for giving, and we just are so appreciative of those who give, because it makes everything we do possible. So I'm so glad you're here today, and we're going to be continuing our series called Pursue, but we just want to just begin right now pursuing God, just asking Him to meet with us. And so we want to just turn our hearts and our focus towards Him. And so we're going to join the band as they lead us in a song. Reflect upon these words. Let it be a chance for you to kind of push the distractions of life out of the way and just to focus your heart onto God so that we can pursue Him.
Savior, I come, quiet my soul. Remember, redemption's in where your blood was spilled for my ransom. Everything I once held dear, I counted all as lost. Lead me to the cross where your love poured out. Bring me to my
We're bringing up Paul, one of the pastors at the Journey. What's the biggest romantic gesture you've ever made? Something big, over the top. Love will make us do some crazy stuff. And nowadays, I mean, it's all the rage, right? Like promposals. I see this for like 8th grade dances, people making these big romantic gestures. In fact, sometimes I'm like, and you better chill out because there's gonna be a lot of pressure when it comes to your engagement proposal if you did that at your 8th grade dance. And I love those engagement proposals. I love the big, over the top romantic gesture things that people will do, crowds around, it's almost always on video, but man, it can be crushing, some of those too. I'm sure you've seen some where somebody makes this big romantic grand gesture, all sorts of people around, it's being videoed, and the person says no. Man, I'm telling you, if I'm going to do some kind of big gesture like that, I got to know like 99.9% sure they're going to say yes to that. Not that it's in question. Now imagine making that big kind of romantic gesture and the person has already left you once, twice, 3 times. I mean, can you imagine doing that? We're in a series called Pursue, and we're looking in the Old Testament book of Hosea, an obscure book with a very unusual story about a prophet and a prostitute, about God calling Hosea the prophet to marry Gomer the prostitute and have children with her. It seems kind of out of character for God. It's unexpected, a holy man and a hooker. And to make matters worse, Hosea wins her heart. He brings her home. They have a child named Jezreel, but then she has 2 more children by other lovers. And then she leaves Hosea and the kids and goes back to prostitution. And if that wasn't enough, God comes back to Hosea and says, Hosea, I want you to go and find Gomer, win her heart back again. And so Hosea does. She's been unfaithful multiple times. And he goes and he finds her, and she's on the auction block being sold as a slave. And he has to actually pay to bid, to win, to bring her back home again. And to make this gesture to bring her back once again. Hosea and Gomer is an incredible story. But it's meant to be an illustration. It's meant to be a living picture of God and Israel. God asked Hosea to marry Gomer so that the people of Israel would see this shocking story. But what he wanted them to see is he wanted them to see themselves in the shocking story. To see their story in the story of Hosea and Gomer, because God had been Hosea. He had been faithful and providing and had wooed her and pursued her. And Israel had been like Gomer. He had been unfaithful again and again and again. Had chased after other things, had pursued other countries, had pursued other lovers, other gods, had given credit to other gods when God was the one who had provided for them. God wanted Israel to see how they had been unfaithful, even though he had been faithful. He wanted to shock them by this incredible story of Hosea and Gomer. Now, what we've also learned throughout this series is that it's not just the story of Hosea and Gomer and God and Israel. It's also the story of God and you and God and me. That we all have been unfaithful, that we all have pursued other things, that we've all chased after other things thinking that they would fulfill us, or chased after other things that thought that that would be what we really want, or that we've given credit to other things for our provision that God has provided us with. Like we've all been Gomer. We've all been that unfaithful person. We've all chased after other lovers. And what God wants for us is the same thing that he wanted for Israel. The same thing that Hosea wanted for Gomer. He wants our hearts. He wants our devotions. I mean, after all, this is a love story. Now, it doesn't sound like a love story all the time in the book of Hosea. And last week, we looked at some verses that talked about judgment, discipline, and a seemingly angry God. And that isn't wrong. Chapter 4, we're going to start today looking in chapter 4, and it's like a courtroom scene. Hosea chapter 4, verse 1 and 2. It says this, "Hear the word of the Lord, you Israelites, because the Lord has a charge to bring against you who live in the land. There is no faithfulness, no love, no acknowledgement of God in the land, no really knowing God. There's only cursing and lying and murder and stealing and adultery. They break all bounds, and bloodshed follows bloodshed." It's like a courtroom scene, and God is the prosecutor. He brings an indictment against the nation. There is no faithfulness, no love, and people don't really know God. And the result is these offenses, right? There's only cursing and lying and murder and stealing and adultery, and bloodshed follows bloodshed. Now, these were all symptoms of the inner thing going on, that they didn't know God, and because of that, they weren't ruled by faithfulness and love. But he brings this indictment against them. And they basically saying, like, enough is enough. No more excuses. Like, this is time to correct this. It's time to change. There is an indictment coming down, and judgment is coming. And judgment would come in the form of Assyria, a country that would come in and would destroy much of the land and exile many of the people. Judgment was coming. There was this moral decay, and things had gotten bad, and they were getting worse. Matter of fact, it was so bad, it wasn't just even the nation or the leaders. It had trickled down into all of society. Even the priests and the pastors, they weren't helping people, they were hurting people. In fact, the more that people sinned, the more money went into the sacrificial system, and the priests were taking money from the sacrificial system and lining their own pockets. So the priests were getting rich off the people behaving badly. So they had no incentive for the people to behave well, because they were making all of this money as the people were bad and had to come and bring these sacrifices. And their hearts weren't in it anyway, but they were having to make these sacrifices, and they're taking money from it. It was a disaster. There was moral decay across the whole country. And this judgment is coming. There was these dark days on the horizon of Israel's future. Now, if this throws off your perception of God a little bit, it's understandable, right? We think about God being loving and kind and good and faithful and always willing and ready to forgive. And he is, but the people of Israel saw no need to even ask for forgiveness. They were so caught up in all of these other things and chasing after all of these other things and pursuing all these other things and other gods and other countries. They didn't see at all their need forgiveness, their need to come back to God. They didn't see any of that, even though God had been the one who had provided for them all along. He protected, he provided, he brought them up out of Egypt, out of slavery. He provided food and drink along the way. He brought them to the promised land and all the prosperity that brought. He had been kind and loving and faithful, just like Hosea. And what was their response? Their response was just like Gomer. It was unfaithfulness. It was a wandering eye. In Hosea chapter 13, verse 6, it says this: "When I fed them," God says, "they were satisfied." Right? So I provided for them, and they enjoyed the provision. But when they were satisfied, they became proud. They began to take credit for it. They began to give credit to others. They began to think about how smart they were and how brilliant they were and how good they were. And then they forgot me. They forgot God. He wooed and pursued and did these romantic gestures, but nothing was working in trying to draw their hearts back to him. They'd forgotten him. They weren't even seeking forgiveness, and God's trying to get their attention. And so wooing and pursuing wasn't working, and so judgment is coming. God has to try something else. Now, I think when we look at this judgment, we can see it like a loving parent with a wayward child. Maybe you have a wayward child. Maybe you were the wayward child. But a loving parent with a wayward child, you'll try just about anything to get their attention, to shake them up, to help them become aware of the direction they're headed, right? Like, You see the train wreck that's coming. You see the danger that they can be in. You see the destruction that can happen in their life and the pain that you want them to avoid. And you're willing to do whatever you need to do, right? That might mean some discipline. That might mean some tough love. That might mean that you ground them, or you take away their phone, or you kick them out of the house, or you have an intervention, or you drive them someplace to get help. You will do whatever you have to kind of shake them up, to wake them up. You know, when we look in the book of Hosea, it can feel a little bit like God is bipolar, right? He's compassionate and loving and wooing, pursuing, and there's all this judgment. But I think it's more like a conflicted parent, right? It's someone who's willing to give some tough love and to bring some discipline, but also is just filled with compassion for their kid. Watching, again, them self-destruct is horrible. And maybe you know the sleepless nights. You know the desperate prayers. You've pleaded and begged and threatened. Or maybe it's even like a small child, 3-year-old who begins to reach for a hot pan on the stove. And what do? Like, you yell, no, right? You might even slap their hand away. And then you pick them up. You're like, no, don't ever, ever touch the stove. Danger. No, 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 right? Like, and then you hug them and you hold them and your heart's beating out of your chest. And they're conflicted. Like, what is going on? They're hugging me and holding me, but they seem very scary. I mean, we're willing to, like, shake them. We're willing to, like, slap their hand because it's danger. And I think God is willing to slap the hand of Israel to protect them, to shake them back to an awareness of what's good and true and right. But it doesn't stay there. It doesn't stay there in judgment and discipline. We see the compassionate heart of God as well. In Hosea chapter 11, verse 8 and 9, it says this: how can I give you up, Ephraim? How can I hand you over, Israel? How can I treat you like Admah? How can I make you like Zeboim? These were two cities that were near Sodom and Gomorrah. My heart is changed within me. All my compassion is aroused. I will not carry out my fierce anger, nor will I devastate Ephraim again, for I'm God and not a man, the Holy One among you. I will not come against their cities. Well, you hear the angst in his voice, the conflicted nature of his voice, but you see the compassion really come out, right? Like, just, I can't do this, right? I love you too much. His compassion, it says, is aroused. I love that. Like, it just wells up within him. It overflows out of him. At the beginning of the chapter 11, it's like God is looking back at their life of Israel as an infant and growing up, and his faithfulness and his pursuing of them. But they're running away and pursuing other things, and it just saddens him. But I was filled with compassion for his kid, filled with compassion for them. It overwhelms. And the result, Hosea chapter 11, verse 10, it says this: they will follow the Lord. He'll roar like a lion, and when he roars, his children will come trembling from the west. They will return. They'll return. This reminds me a little bit of the story of the prodigal son in the New Testament of the Bible, where this young adult son decides that he wants his inheritance and he wants it now. He doesn't want to wait for his dad to give him his inheritance when he dies. He wants it now. And his dad agrees. He takes half of what he owns, he gives it to his son, and his son goes out to the big city. He parties it up and he blows everything. He ends up living on the streets. He's got really no food, no place to live. And he decides he's going to go back to his dad's home. Now, he's pretty sure his dad isn't going to want anything to do with him, but maybe, just maybe, he'll let him be a servant in the house. And as he's coming home and thinking, man, I don't know, but it's better than what I'm doing now. I'll just give it a shot. His dad has been waiting and watching. And when his dad sees him coming down the road from a long way off, he goes running out to meet him and throws his arms around him and hugs him and welcomes him home. This is the picture that we get of God. Right? God is watching and waiting as he throws his arms around us. Right? They will return. And as they return and they come back, he's like, yes, they came back. but it's more. The story of Hosea and Gomer paints the picture of God and Israel and God and us. It's a picture of marriage, right? Of pursuing and wooing. And here's what God says in Hosea chapter 2. Listen to the kind of the love language in here. Verse 14. Therefore, I'm now going to allure her. I'll lead her into the wilderness, and I'll speak tenderly to her. There I'll give her back her vineyards, and I'll make the valley of Achor a door of hope. There she'll respond as in the days of her youth, as in the days she came up out of Egypt. I love that poetic language, right? I'll allure her. I'll lead her into the wilderness. I'll speak tenderly to her. I'm going to woo her. I'm going to win her heart back again. And then it says, and I'll make the valley of Achor a door of hope. Achor meant trouble. It says, I'll make the valley of trouble a door of hope. Now, the reason why it was called a valley of trouble, it was reminding the Israel people of when they were coming up out of Egypt in the Exodus towards the promised land, and a guy named Achan who committed this very public sin. It was really a black eye, a blemish on the people of Israel. So whenever anybody heard the Valley of Achor, they would immediately connect that with Achan and like, oh, that was a dark day for our country. That's the kind of thing that happened there. And so he says, I'll make the Valley of Achor, this valley of trouble, a door of hope. In essence, what God's saying is, I'm shutting the door on our past. And there's a door of hope. There's a new day that is dawning. And then he says that she'll respond as in the days of her youth, as in the day she came up out of Egypt. It's like a teen in love, right? He's remembering the Israelites coming out of slavery in Egypt. And he's defeated the Egyptians, and they've broken free from slavery, and there's celebration, and there's just a joy that's coming up as they're excited and praising God and looking forward to the future. It'll be like that again. Hosea chapter 2, verse 19 continues these kind of themes. It says this, I will betroth you to me forever. I'll betroth you in righteousness and justice, in love and compassion. I'll betroth you in faithfulness, and you'll acknowledge the Lord. You'll know him. In that day I'll respond, declares the Lord. I'll respond to the skies. They'll respond to the earth. The earth will respond to the grain, the new wine, and the olive oil. In other words, I'll be providing for you. There'll be prosperity again, and they will respond to Jezreel. I'll plant her for myself in the land, and I will show my love to the one I called not my loved one. And I'll say to those called not my people, you are my people, and they will say, you are my God. Now, 3 times he says, I'll betroth you. We've heard that language actually not too long ago. At Christmas time, when we talk about the birth of Jesus, Mary and Joseph were betrothed to one another. It was an engagement process, but it was much more intense than our engagement process, right? If they wanted to break off the engagement, they had to go through a divorce process. And I think what God is saying here is, I'll betroth you, I'll betroth you, I'll betroth you in these ways. And I think it's a picture of the relationship at the beginning, of the adulterous past forgotten, starting over like nothing had happened again. He says, now this relationship, this one is going to last. I will betroth you. I will betroth you. I will betroth you. And that marriage relationship, that relationship between God and Israel, it's going to be marked by love and faithfulness and compassion. I love at the end where it recalls the names of Hosea's kids. If you've been with us throughout this series, you'll remember this. Their names were Jezreel and then Lo-Ruhamah and Lo-Ami. These are the 2 children that Gomer had that weren't Hosea's. Lo-Ruhamah meant not loved, which again we said was like a huge complex for a kid, right? When you're called not loved. But what does he say here? He says, I will show my love to the one I called not my loved one. And then he says, I will say to those called not my people, you are my people. And their third child, Gomer's third child, was Lo-Ami, which meant not my people. He says, but now you are my people, and they will say, you are my God. It almost sounds like marriage vows, right? Like, I declare to you that you are my people, and I declare to you that you are my God. It's this beautiful picture of mercy winning the day. Like, he will win their hearts back. In James 2 in the New Testament, it says, mercy triumphs over judgment. And I think that's really the picture that we get here, right? There's judgment from this conflicted parent who's trying to do anything they can to shake them and wake them back up. But mercy triumphs over judgment. He will win their heart again. The relationship will be restored, and it will be like it was in the beginning. The adulterous past forgotten. The waywardness forgotten. And this relationship will be marked by faithfulness and love and compassion. Mercy will win the day. God is this loving parent who will do whatever he has to rescue them. He's also this husband-to-be who will woo and pursue and win their heart no matter what the cost. And this is what Hosea did with Gomer, to pursue even though she was unfaithful and to win her back. And it's what God did with Israel, and it's what God does with us too. I don't know what your story, your past, your unfaithfulness has been, how far you've run, all the different things that you've pursued other than God. But he's this loving parent who will do whatever he has to win back our heart, to pursue and to woo us, to sometimes maybe discipline us, to say, come on, like turn your heart back to me, return to me. But if we'll turn back, if we'll begin to head back down the road, he will run and he'll meet us with his arms open wide, and it will be like that adulterous past is totally forgotten. He'll do whatever it takes to win our heart. Now that doesn't mean that God is wringing his hands and biting his nails. Oh no, what will they do? What will I ever do without them? God isn't needy, right? He's not desperate for us, but he does want what's good and best for us. He loves us. God won't force you, though, to love him. God won't force. That's not really love, right? So God won't force us to love him, but he will love us. He will speak tenderly to us. He will try to win our heart back, maybe discipline us, maybe shake us, do whatever he has to so that we can experience life with him, the life that we are meant to live, the relationship that we are meant to have, to really know his heart, know his love. And God is doing whatever he has to win your love, including sending his son Jesus to die on a cross for us so that we could be forgiven and that we could have life. He was willing to do whatever he had to, no matter the cost, even though it cost him everything. You know, the incredible story of Hosea and Gomer is one of faithfulness and unfaithfulness, of pursuit, of broken hearts and restored hearts, of a man who faithfully pursued and wooed. And it's the story of God and Israel. It's the story of God and us. And there's a little more to the story and a response that needs to be made. And we're going to talk about that next week. Listen, no matter what your story, no matter what your past, no matter what other things you've pursued and chased after, you have a God who pursues you, who will do whatever he has to win your heart, and who has his arms open wide for you if we'll just return. Let's pray together. God, I pray that we would see you in all of your glory and all of your beauty, that you are a God who pursues and woos and chases after, and even in the discipline, even in the judgment, it is all done to just draw us back to this relationship that we were meant to be in, to have this relationship restored, to have a relationship where the past is forgotten and it's marked by faithfulness and love and compassion. God, we're grateful that you don't hold our unfaithfulness against us, that you don't hold those times when we've turned and went the other way and chased after other things, that can be forgotten, that can be in the past, and that we can be made right and connected to you and in a relationship, no matter what our story and how far we've run, no matter how late in the game it is for us or not, that we can have a relationship with you, that we can be connected to you, that you're a God who loves us and woos us and pursues us, and have your arms open wide to us. Like the prodigal son and the loving father, you're just waiting for us to come back home. God, thank you. In Jesus' name, amen.
Well, thank you so much for sharing today, Paul. We're so grateful for God who pursues us, who is faithful to us. And if you are looking for more insight, Paul will be on Facebook Live tomorrow morning for a Monday morning remix. You can join him there, or just whenever you're on Facebook throughout the day, you can find that video there, and he'll be giving more insight into what we talked about today. And if you're looking for more details, more next steps, check out that growth pathway on our resource page. Check out the Next Steps blog for all the details for things coming up. And if you are a parent and got some kids at home, do Sundays at home right now. Gather them up, and you can find all the resources on our Journey Kids page. Well, I'm glad you were with us today. Next week, we're going to be wrapping up the series, so I hope you can join us then. Until then, I hope you have a great week and hope to see you back here next Sunday.